Hello and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Friday. My name is Laura Bradburn and I'm joined as always by Tony Haggerty. How you doing, Tony?
I'm very well, Laura. Yourself?
Not too bad. A bit of a rush there. I was running late, as I told you before. I was having some technical difficulties. Turns out, guys, if you don't remember to plug in your headphones, you can't hear anything. So remember to do that before getting started.
Who'd have thunk that?
Jim, how you doing?
Good, Laura. Thank you. Good.
I was expecting us to come on today and have some pretty big news to break, but unfortunately, it remains the case that nothing has happened. We had a couple of tweets from Celtic just before we came on, but unfortunately it was to do with well, not unfortunately, but it was to do with the women's football and that kind of thing. I was expecting something bigger, but we wait and hope rather than expectation, but we'll move on to other things. Guys, I was talking to you last night when we were talking about getting the show started. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was Callum McGregor seems to have come to the fore a little bit for some criticism, which we'll get into. I think it's probably the profile of it's been raised by sending off last week against Rangers. But before we get into talking about him, Jim, Tony and I were on the post-match reaction. What did you make of the performance against Rangers last week?
I thought we started okay, and then everything changes halfway through the first half. I mean, McGregor makes a magnificent save, not for the first time this. Scott Bain's beaten by a goal from the guy's chest, and then Calmack gets sent off, and so from then on in, you're thinking this is just damage limitation. I was watching the game with one of my sons, and I said, if you can get out here, no more than a 3-goal defeat, that would maybe score. And then we get that hope, and then we lose a daft goal again, and only 2-1 at half time. And you think, well, maybe we still got a chance. And then the Turnbull header, and then they score virtually next minute. And then I'm quite surprised they didn't go for it. I mean, there was still a good 30 minutes plus left. I'd have thought they'd have brought on 3 subs and really gone for it, because, you know, I would have thought this could have been the last of the death by 1,000 cuts. I'll get that in quickly this week to get a real doing.
Oh, we're early with that today.
Because I thought that'd be the last one. You know, losing 5, 6, 7, which we could have last week. So that's over. And although we've only got 2 games left, I can't see us losing 4 or 5-0 to the 2 teams that we've got left. But I think if we'd have played that way with 11 on the park, I'd have been a bit more harsh on the team. But I think when you're down to 10 men, halfway through the first half, playing against teams who are playing with confidence and momentum, etc., etc., it was always a bit of a damage limitation. So to get 4-1, fine. We move on.
Tony,
Laura, one thing I was just going to say. I'm going to go all Norwegian commentator here. All right, John Kennedy, can you hear me? Ian Bankier, can you hear me? Peter Law, can you hear me? Dermot Desmond, can you hear me? Our boys took a hell of a beating. It's on your watch. Don't ever let that happen again. It's over to you to sort this mess out. End of. We move on.
Well,
also, just to come back in, to come back in, that we sat here last Friday hoping that the team might look a wee bit different and they play certain players. So the team selection, you have to question that straight away. The substitutions bordered on bizarre, utterly and totally bizarre. Mikey Johnson coming on to play up front instead of Lee Griffiths. I thought maybe up to a couple of weeks ago, I think before the game, I thought John Kennedy was doing okay, incrementally a wee bit better each week. He was playing things safe, as I said before. I think he's quite risk averse. But there's so many bad decisions last Sunday, and he should be nowhere near it. I mean, if there was any chance of him getting the job next year, he should be nowhere near the job after last Sunday.
Yeah, Tony, you've said yourself, if John Kennedy's gets good coaching skills, then he's keeping them well hidden. But to come back to you on the point that Jim raised, it was something that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but you know, the Turnbull header and that being a chance that looked so bang on for a goal, ending up being missed. You know, it was a bit of a turning point in the game. Do you think maybe is it wishful thinking to say that, you know, perhaps if that goes in, the game turns out entirely differently, or was it always likely that we were going to sort of crumble in the end, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's wishful thinking. Turnbull's Mr. Sitter. It should be 2 each. It wasn't. We get cuffed. You know what I mean? End of. It's like, you can see here ifs and buts and maybes if Callum doesn't slide in front of the referee 2 minutes after, not long after he's been booked. Give him a decision. He would have stayed in the park. Yada, yada, yada. But, I mean, it's a big moment in the game, and he's missed it. And then you take your medicine, you take your dumps. At this moment in time, they are better than Celtic. Steven Gerrard has the hex on. He had the hex on Lenny, and he had the hex on Kennedy. And as we said last week, Jim just mentioned it there, we spoke about certain personnel that we wanted to see in that team, and he played right into Rangers' hand. And I said it on the Monday podcast, when Gerrard saw that team, he must have just been rubbing his hands. And as Jim says, I'm surprised as well that they didn't go for it, because Celtic were there for a tanking after Kennedy, Calmack gets sent off. So, like Jim, I was pleased that it didn't go 5, 6, 7.
There was no question the best team won. Don't have an issue with that at all. But if the Turnbull header goes in, I'm thinking we're not going to get a doing. I don't think we'd win the game. We won't get a doing. When it doesn't go in and they score straight away, you're thinking we could get a doing here. So 4-1's a heavy defeat. It's maybe not embarrassing, but it's a heavy defeat.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tony.
A temporary respite if the Turnbull header goes in, possibly. But
aye. We move on. Yeah.
We move on. Yes, I'm all for that. I'm all for the we move on. I'm on the we move on bus.
Jim, yeah. I'll get your thoughts. We've talked a bit about it, about how much of a turning point it was, the Callum McGregor sending off. You see the same old things come out when people talk about it. He's not that kind of player. He's not, But it was shocking to me that regardless of whether they were bookings or not, that he gave the referee the decisions to make. What was your reaction when you saw that he was being sent off? Did you expect it when the second challenge went in, or were you shocked that was the outcome?
That phrase, he gave the referee a decision. The first person I heard use that phrase was Gordon Strachan when Alan Thompson gets sent off at Ibrox. I've got a lot of time for Gordon Strachan. He's one of the few pundits I would actually listen to, and I think Cam gave him a decision to make, I think it was a yellow card offence. And hey ho, I was surprised that he booked a Rangers player so early on, giving him the yellow card. I don't think there was much in that as well. But having given that yellow card, the first Callum McGregor yellow card was definitely merited, and then that one as well. I wasn't too sure about the rules. There was some stuff in social media about there's a new rule that that if a goal is scored after that, you book the player, but I think that's wrong as well. So there's a bit of confusion on the rules, but I think there were 2 yellow card offences, and if that is the rules, then that's the rules, and no complaints. Yeah.
Tony, have you seen anything like that about the rules? I recognise what Jim's saying, and I heard a lot of people saying, that the referee was wrong to book McGregor because you shouldn't book a player if you play advantage. Now, to me, that was never my understanding of the rule, because if that was the case, advantage wouldn't be a thing. You would just, would just either stop the play and book the player, or you wouldn't do it at all. So, did you see any clarification on what the actual, the confusion is around that?
My understanding was the same as yours, and then when I saw all this appear on social media, I get even more confused. Right, but this was the referee's first Rangers Celtic game, so he, as Jim said, he stamped his authority early doors with that early red card. So when you see that, when you see a referee does that so early, I leave it down to the discipline and the of the players. Then they say, right, you have to say, okay, that's the way it's going to be today. I need to watch myself. You need to read the room and the mood music, and and allow for the fact that it's the guy's first, big game. So I wouldn't have been sliding in and diving in like that, especially after he's booked the first guy who's been involved in an elbow, I think it was. So you take a deep breath and say to yourself, okay, I'm not getting away with anything here. I need to be at the top of my game, and I need to be disciplined. And I just think Callum McGregor, it was a bit of ill discipline, petulance, call it what you like, stupidity, a brainstorm, because he did it right in front of him twice.
Yeah.
I just think rules are no rules, you know what I mean? And it's a kind of that stock phrase he gave the referee, but he did give the referee a decision to make, and in the referee's eyes it was 2 yellow card offences, so he has to go. You can argue the toss all day, but I just thought it was a bit reckless and stupid from Callum. No, wasn't he like getting into do a player, but it was just, you know, it was stupidity basically.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, I
can't allow players for being stupid when the referee has come out and given an early yellow card and basically saying, that's your warning shot, guys, behave.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, Laura, there's been a lot of talk this season of Callum McGregor having to do Scott Brown's job from time to time. You know, so I'm not exactly sure whether was that meant to be Scott Brown in that position and Callum McGregor's running a bit like headless chicken, cover for things, and start to do that, and you maybe lose your focus on what you're meant to be doing and whatever. So maybe that was a factor as well. Because I think people were talking about some of the stats in the game, and when they focus on Scott Brown, you get turned so many times. So if you're Callum McGregor, you may be thinking, I need to cover for him. Well, maybe there's a wee bit of that, but 2 yellow cards, no complaints. Move on again. That's 10 times I've said that so far.
Goes back to what you spoke about Friday then, personnel. Scott Brown should probably not have played in that game. Yeah, you probably agree with that, Laura. You talk about a decision probably taken on sentiment, which you spoke about, which there is no room for it, and Celtic paid the ultimate price for putting out the wrong team. Yeah,
well, just to open up on the discussion that's been had in the comments, we saw Alan Robertson there and Brown Warrior here. He's been flat for 3 seasons. Season took its toll. He's tired. He has played an awful lot of football. And just before we talk a little bit more about McGregor, David Kelly on the YouTube comments, and thanks everybody for your comments on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. He's clarified for us the rules changed as a player can't be given a direct red card for denying a goal scoring opportunity if advantage is played. Klamala at St Johnstone is a perfect example, hence the yellow, not a red. So, it was within the rules according to what David Kelly's saying there, that because it was a second yellow, it was still allowed to be bookable. It would only have been if it was a straight red. But we'll move on to the comments.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, we'll move on to the comments that come up on the screen there about McGregor. Now, just before we came on today, I thought because we're going to be talking about Callum in a little bit more depth, I thought I would do a wee poll, and I just said, would Callum McGregor be a huge loss if he left this summer? Now, not a huge sample vote, but we ended up with nearly 700 votes on that. 63% said yes, he would be a huge loss. 23% said no, and 14% said maybe. So there's a sizable chunk of people who aren't sure or are pretty convinced that he wouldn't be a loss. Obviously, the majority saying that he would be. Tony, I'll come back to you first on this. I think he is still being selected somewhat on sentiment and things like that, but when you look at it as a whole, you can't help but understand that his level of play or his tiredness or his fatigue or anything like that is going to go down. Kieran Tierney and James Forrest would have played the same amount of games if it hadn't been for them being more injury prone. Callum McGregor's been fortunate that he hasn't been injured, but in that sense he's then been played into the ground. Do you think he's been mismanaged during his time at the club that things have turned out the way they have?
Without a doubt. This is a player who, under Brendan Rodgers, produced the best football of his career to date, and he regressed this season. But I think Callum McGregor, every good player suffers a dip in form. But everybody picked on Callum McGregor this season because it was a season that meant so much. But that's just indicative and microcosmic of the malaise that's set in with not just Callum McGregor, the whole team. You can label it the whole team, but because Cal Mackey expects so much, his bar was raised very, very high, and he slipped well below that. He was an easy target, Target, and we've said it ourselves on this. We've discussed, and then people were talking about, he's never a captain. He's no leadership qualities. I said it myself. I didn't see it, and maybe possibly being unfair because there might be an issue of burnout. And it was Jim saying covering for Scott Brown and things like that, But we come to expect so much from Callum McGregor. He would be a huge miss if he left the club. And I just think maybe he does need a rest. Maybe he is suffering from burnout. And maybe a new pair of eyes on Callum McGregor will get what Brendan Rodgers got out of him, the best football of his Celtic career. And if that man is Eddie Howe, then you might be able to transform him and do the same thing. But somebody needs to say to him, right, Callum, this is you from a couple of seasons ago. This is you from this season. Compare and contrast and go through it and see what he says himself. You know, because only Callum McGregor has the answers. But football fans they always expect, and when players like Callum McGregor don't deliver, they become an easy target. And I do feel for him, because I think he is part of the malaise that has struck the club this season. And he's not alone. But I do think he's one that, be careful what you wish for. And he would be sad, he would be badly missed if he leaves another gaping hole in your team and in your midfield in particular. So, I agree with the 63% that say he would be missed if he leaves, and I personally wouldn't want him to leave. I just think someone else could get the same kind of tune out of him as Brendan did, and maybe that's what he needs as well.
So, Jim, as Tony's touching on there's a couple of major issues. Obviously, the fact that he's been overplayed, the fact that he's possibly not been receiving the coaching at the level this season, or certainly not been receiving it at the level this season that he would have done previous. What are your thoughts on his performances this season? Are people being overly critical, do you think, because we're just looking for somebody to blame, or do you think he has been poorer than he usually would be?
I think I'll use the old football phrase, form is temporary, class is permanent. He's a brilliant player. I just echo Tony's sentiments. He's a brilliant player. You don't want to lose Callum McGregor. As Tony said, be careful what you wish for. He's a great player. He dictates the tempo of the game. You play him in the right position. Him and Turnbull are fantastic. Could be a fantastic partnership if played in the right positions, with the right tactics, with the right manager, etc., etc. This has been a dip this season. They've all dipped. I mean, you can pick a number of Celtic players who should be better. Look at someone like Shane Duffy. Shane Duffy should have been great this season, but he was hopeless. So, as I say, I think he's a brilliant player, Callum McGregor, and easily. I mean, if you take out this season, he's like over that 3 seasons before that, or the 4 seasons before that. I'm getting mixed up because of COVID. Easily the most consistent player over that period. He might not be captain material. I get that, but.
No, that was just my opinion.
No, sorry. I mean that wasn't a big issue in the grand scheme of things. I think for me, I'd be looking for a different type of captain. I just let Callum McGregor play his game. I think he's a fantastic player. And in terms of this season, I mean, everyone has been poor this season, and I think I'm not going to use that phrase again, but everything that could have went wrong has went wrong, and it must be hard for guys like him because they've known so much success over the past few years, and it just imploded. So many bad decisions, and he's in there, and I felt really sorry for him because there was the game which I can't remember, was it the Livingston game or the Hibs game? They interviewed after the final whistle. They virtually said, "We've got no idea what we're doing."
Yeah, I can't remember which one. But
having to face the camera, and he was dead honest, and he was saying, "Look, we've no idea what we're doing here." Now, if you're used to a different type of manager who's quite specific in what you do and how you do it, and all of a sudden you've been told, just go in the park and do what you can, if it doesn't go well, I'm actually quite surprised he's still here. I wouldn't be surprised if he went, because I think he's a great player, and he would do well for any team down south. Maybe not a top 6 team, maybe I suppose Leicester are a top 6 team these days, but any kind of middle team.
Brendan admires him a lot. So
but I think any team
brace yourself for that happening in the summer, possibly.
I'm just wondering.
He's a fantastic player. Yeah, sorry.
I'm just wondering. Looking at Bronzegrove Boy on Twitter has commented, Calmac needs to revert and be played 20 yards further forward. Part player, part management. I think, Tony, and this is not to. This is not to come down too hard on Scott Brown, as I am wont to do at times, but there's a suggestion there, perhaps, that looking at the way Scott Brown played on against Rangers last week, he's lost a lot of mobility, as is the case with anybody reaching their mid-30s. Do you think Callum McGregor's suffering perhaps from a little bit having to carry the can for too many other players this season, and he's not able to do what he does best?
Without a doubt, but we were told Scott Brown was finished when Brendan Rodgers walked in the door. Brendan Rodgers got a fantastic tune out of him.
Yeah.
But to you, Jim, and myself, you knew Scott Brown's tenure as a footballer was coming to an end, and he should have played a big part this season. As much as you've touched upon it, but the sentiment thing, it's got no part in football. His legs had gone, really, when you saw him. Great squad player, great influence to have around. I would have kept him for that, solely just for that, But as a footballer, his legs had gone, and it showed on Sunday because he gets skint so many times. And possibly Callum gets sent off because of it. And he's been doing that all season. And it only kind of steadied itself a wee bit when Turnbull came into the team and Sorrell came in. And Callum looked a bit more, comfortable because he had legs and runners round about him and guys. And that's not, I'm not bashing or baiting Scott Brown. I'm just saying every footballer comes to the end of their race, Their legs go, the brain goes a wee bit. And Scott Brown was just an aging footballer in terms of football and was slowing down. But I'm only a supporter, you know what I mean? But I can see that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So how can coaches that work with these guys every day do all sorts of bleep tests or whatever you want to call them, or, fitness stuff, not see that this was the end of an era, basically. And all that affected Callum McGregor badly. Because I think he tried to take on that mantle. And as I say, he became a target because the bar that he'd set so high, as Jim said, he's a fantastically talented and gifted footballer, Callum McGregor. I think I've seen him do something wrong once, and that was when he scudded the ball past the post against Borussia Mönchengladbach away.
Yeah.
And then Brendan Rodgers had a word with him, probably said to him, you should have passed that into the net. And every other goal he scored since then, he's stroked it with conviction, or he's hammered it knowing fine well it's going in, But he snatched the one in Germany, and he learnt. And I thought to myself, do you know what? That's a player that's listened and learned, because in those situations he ended up becoming very, very clinical. So something's happened this season, and it's affected Callum McGregor. But he is, as Jim said and I've said, I think he's still a fantastically gifted footballer, and I don't want to see him leave. I want to see him and Turnbull, possibly Sorrell and and others that the new manager will bring in, form the basis of a midfield, because I think that's quite strong looking to the future.
I think it's also, a fair point. Sorry, Jim, on you go.
Okay. There's been so many bad decisions made this year, but one of the biggest ones is the squad management. We had nearly 30 first-team players, but we kept playing the same guys game after game, and then you wonder why they're burnt out.
Yeah.
So squad management was really, really poor. Squad rotation, whatever. So to do that, you need some sort of plan. You can't just throw that together. Players go in the park, do what you can, and that seemed to be what was happening this year. They must have planned that out. Other people have mentioned that bringing some of the young guys through, there had to be a plan for that. So you have to plan these things. It's not like the old days. Pick the best 11, go in the park, we'll play 60 games a season, and we'll see how it goes. It's a bit more sophisticated than that these days. But if a first team squad of 30 players, there should be no need to overplay players,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me.
I would agree with that. I think Scott Brown's season has been a symptom of mismanagement. Callum McGregor's has been a knock-on of mismanagement in that case. We've all seen what happened with the goalkeeper situation. Somehow Neil Lennon, before he left, managed to shoot the confidence of three goalkeepers in one. So that, it's symptomatic all over the squad, and it's certainly not helped us put anything together in terms of a consistent run. Speaking of which, I don't know if you guys saw it or if anybody watching saw it, but I noticed yesterday, I think it was Hamish over on 67 Hail Hail picked up on that Scott Brown had issued an apology to the Celtic supporters. Now, I think we've all had enough apologies over the season. We'd rather they just did things right than apologise for it after. But it did say a lot to me in that Scott Brown said something along the lines of that he apologised for the performance because this was supposed to be our showcase season. Now, I was quite surprised by it, and Jim, I'll come to you first, because what has been coming out of the club, certainly from a higher level than the players anyway, has been that we are all overreacting, that we are all a bit entitled, that we are all not appreciating what's gone before. This was the first hint that I saw that the players at least were exactly aware of what was on their shoulders this season and, acknowledged that they hadn't lived up to it in this season of all seasons. Jim, first of all, did you see it? What did you make of the wording of it, or what do you make of it hearing it now?
I never saw it, but I think it's really difficult for any of the players or the managers to say anything about this season. I don't think they can be honest because it's still actually happening. I mean, there must have been so much turmoil going on behind the scenes. I don't think they can say very much. I think it's different when they retire and they look back on it. And I enjoy listening to ex-football players talking about what they did when they played football. I don't particularly enjoy listening to football players or managers when they're still in it, because I think there's a limit to what they can say, and Mr. Haggerty will know that better than me working in the media. So they're going to do the right things, and some of it will be scripted and whatever. So you couldn't really expect Scott Brown to say any more that really sorry for how things went. And I think I said last week when we talked about the team that should play last Sunday, it should have been players, who knew it meant something, and Scott Brown would have been one of those players, and Griffiths and all these kind of guys. So I don't pay very much attention to what players and managers say in the here and now. I think, as Tony said before, there's going to be a number of books written about this season in terms of what happened, and hopefully we get to know the real story. And I think, Tony, you said that the men who sold the 10, that's just the man who sold the 10. I know who's in the front cover of that book. Over to you, Tony.
I just like the rhyming thing with that, Jim, so but listen, Scott Brown's words, whatever, it's empty rhetoric, there is, as I said on Monday, there is nothing that anyone from Celtic can say that will soothe or comfort any of the Celtic fans. All they wanted was for Celtic this season to do their talking on the pitch when it mattered, and they failed abysmally. They were struck dumb, if you want to keep the talking metaphor going. They just, for whatever reason, and as Jim says and I've said, it will take years, but it will eventually come out, or someone will speak about it, and they'll open up that wound again, and it'll be painful and it will hurt. But that's the only time when the Celtic supporters might get some succour and comfort from it, because they might be able to finally get a grip and understand how this season fell by the wayside as quickly as it did. Because Jim was coming out and saying, "I'm sorry, we know you're sorry." You know what I mean? There's nobody more sorry than the fans. You know what I mean? But, it's coming out as an exercise. As a captain, I guess it's your duty to try and appease people and say something. But sometimes you're better just saying nothing, because it's Jim says, the season's still going on, and it's in there and out there with a lot of the Celtic supporters, because they couldn't care less, because they just feel so let down by a collective from those at the top, the management and the players. So say nothing, just lick your wounds and move on, and let the new regime come in and let the rebuild happen until such times when, in years to come, when the man who sold the 10, the men who sold the 10, it has been written, that people can finally get to know a version of the truth or the real story.
Yeah. Last Sunday must have been the final nail in Scott Brown in terms of he must have been. He took off last Sunday, and he's sitting in the stand watching a shambles. And he's been used to success every single year, 9 in a row. We're going for 10, and then if you put yourself in his shoes, it must have been just a complete disaster. And he must have been so looking forward to this season, immortality, 10 in a row. And over the last few months, people are saying, "Oh, get rid of him," and all this kind of stuff. It's all been really, really negative. And it's such a shame for him. Such a shame for him.
I do agree with what both of you are saying in terms of in general points about footballers, having to speak in media-trained sort of quotes and things like that, and very often issue cliches. I just thought it was particularly interesting with that quote that he said this was supposed to be our showcase season. There was never any indication from the club when things started going wrong, that they were aware of how important this particular season was, to me anyway. And I just thought it was quite interesting because it was him stepping slightly out with the boundaries of what the club had been saying for the rest of the season.
If it's a showcase season, Laura, you prepare then for a showcase season, right?
Yeah.
You prepare for that. And again, I guess, as you say, reading into that, then it's maybe a wee done at those above.
Yeah, yeah. ...
This was supposed to be a showcase season, and I've ended up, leaving the club a loser, not the exit that I wanted. And maybe a wee kind of shot over the bow to them to say, you failed to prepare, not me or the players as such, you guys, because you never armed the manager with the backroom staff or armed the manager with the players that were capable of winning the 10. So
also, I think if you're
go, Jim, go.
No, I was going to say that if you are Scott Brown and you go back to the start of the season and you're visualising the end of the season and you've won 10 in a row and you're immortal, you're legendary, no one's ever going to do that again. And you are Scott Brown, you're the guy that's done it, and you're the captain, so, he must be thinking this will be the greatest ever thing, ever.
Yeah.
And that's been just taken away. And it is kind of death by 1,000 cuts, because as every week went on this season, something else happened. They made it more and more difficult and more difficult. And they must have saw that just fading away, week by week by week by week. And then last week he gets taken off, and we get hammered 4-1 by a team that 3 years ago we were hammering 5-1s and 5-0. It's been such a turnaround for him.
Yeah, I think we've touched on it before, but it just shows you what can happen when, as is the case, the team across the city have a sort of aim that they're all fighting for. They're all in the same boat. They do have some very good players. I've said before that I like Barisic, I like Kamara, I like Aribo. I think they're all great players, but the rest are of an average level, but have been pulled up by this idea of what they were searching for and what they were looking for. And I think that was something that we had as well. Not everybody throughout the quadruple treble seasons, not every player we had was an outstanding player, but they were pulled up to a certain level by the way in which they were coached. Very much the same way as the players have been pulled down to a certain level by the way they've not been coached this season. So I think it's as much about the team collective as anything, and I think it's something that's been missing for us this season. Jim, it wasn't something that I thought we were going to talk about today, but just because you highlighted it before about Callum McGregor not seeming captain material. Now, we've all talked about the fact that there doesn't seem to be anybody obvious who's going to take over the captain's role, but just as a part of a wider discussion, I've been sitting thinking, and I wondered what your thoughts were on it. Do you think in the modern game the captain's role is still an important one? Do you think it's something that we need to try and get right when Scott Brown leaves, or do you think it's a kind of outdated idea?
Before I answer that, but just touch on the last point there, I think when you're winning games, you've got a cause to play for, and you're all trying to achieve that cause. See, when you start to lose your way a wee bit, it becomes really difficult. And I think they've had that. Once they got themselves in front this season, they had a cause to hang on to. And you get into all these kind of wartime metaphors. They're in the trenches, they put their bodies in the line and all that kind of stuff. That's what happens. We've not been there this season, so I don't think our players have reacted that way. To answer the question about the captain, I think very much so. It's important. I think my big concern, if you go back through Celtic's history in the last 50, 60 years, we're going to have a number of new players coming in. How many? 6, 7, 8, 9? Who knows? Who's the person you go and see when you walk in the door? You go and see the captain. I don't mean like to tell you it's going to be rainy in Inverness on a Tuesday night, but to tell you the kind of real stuff that really, really matters. And I think if you played for Celtic in the 60s and the 70s, and you walk through the door and Billy Hill starts talking to you, straight away, bang, you're part of the club. Roy Aitken, Tom Boyd, Scott Brown. I think these guys get it. And I think the chances are we're going to get a new captain who's not a current member of the Celtic team. So he won't get it straight away. So I think that's an issue straight away. You look to your captain for inspiration. There's a comment during the week with Charlie Nicholas saying that Scott Brown's not a legend. He's not the greatest player that ever played for Celtic, but he's one of the best captains. If you were to compare him contrast other captains we've had. He's a far better captain than someone like Paul McStay. Say, nowhere near as good a player as Paul McStay. But I think when you're looking at captains, you're looking at the attributes of a captain, things like leadership and stuff like that, and I think Scott Brown has that. I don't really see anyone who has that. People mention Julian. I think he's a bit of a drama queen. Joe throws his hands up in the air when things happen, blames people and whatnot, So I could understand why they might go for Joe, but he's going to be out till the end of the year, apparently. Ayer, obviously, is the guy we've talked about, but that second goal last week gets you thinking, you put your head in front of the ball, son. If you're not willing to do that, maybe you're not captain material. So I don't see that sort of natural born leader with those leadership attributes. And as I said earlier, I'm not bored if it's not Callum McGregor, because just like Callum, concentrate his game. And in fact, I mentioned Paul McStay. I think me captain affected Paul McStay. If Paul McStay plays game rather than the burden, or give him the burden for the whole club. So I think the captain is important. I think he's one of the kind of figureheads of the club. He should be the figurehead of the club. It shouldn't be the manager, and it certainly shouldn't be the chief executive. He should be the focal point of the club. So you want somebody who's got those kind of leadership qualities, who can speak well, who understands the club, who understands the fans. Actually understands the fans. So that's a bit of a concern with me, that we don't actually have somebody currently then. And if an Eddie Howe comes, then I think he'll bring somebody with him.
Yeah.
Maybe a centre back, possibly, with those kind of leadership qualities to get people going. When it's, you're 1-0 down and you've got 10 minutes to go and he's rallying the troops. That didn't happen this season. Nothing happened this season. There's so many games this season where we needed some leadership, some inspiration. It didn't happen.
Yeah, just to pick up on what you've said there, Brendan Rodgers did it with Kolo Touré. Okay, he wasn't a captain, but he brought somebody in who understood his ideas, he knew could integrate with the squad, became a popular figure in the dressing room, and that certainly worked. But before I get your thoughts on it, I'd just like to say, in defence of of Paul McStay, I think obviously we all agree, much better player than Scott Brown. But I think you would be talking about a very different captain in Scott Brown if he had had to deal with all of the issues that were happening off the park at the club, that Paul McStay had to deal with. That's one of my kind of issues with the way Scott Brown is lauded, is that I still believe to some extent that he has never shown himself in the best light when his back's been up against the wall. He's very effective and a cult icon, or an icon with the Celtic fans, when he puts in a hard tackle and gets up and saunters about when we're 3-0 up in a game or whatever. I do believe that, we would be talking about, I don't know, he would have had the temperament to deal with things at the club the way Paul McStay did as a captain, but that's just my personal opinion. Tony, what are your thoughts on what Jim said there, and the idea of a captain in general? Is it an outdated idea, something we still need? What do you think?
No, not at all. I think the quadruple treble's not a bad legacy, Laura. You know what I mean? If you're talking about Scott Brown, you know what I mean? So and he was a beating heart of that Celtic team for a long time. And I'd go as far as to say he was probably the beating heart of Scottish football for a while as well. So I'm not saying you're doing him a disservice, but I get that you can't touch the maestro in your eyes. So I wouldn't. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think every Celtic supporter loves Paul McStay as well. So, but I think a lot of Celtic supporters will retain a lot of affection for Scott Brown for what he achieved, because he was an achiever. And I think they're sad that, as he said himself, that the showcase season ended the way it did. So I think there's a bit of, sadness attached to Scott Brown. But I disagree completely with Charlie Nick saying he's not a legend. He's a legend.
100%.
He'll throw him 4 times the medals that Charlie won. So there you go. Right. And I love Charlie too. You know my thoughts on Charlie. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, the captain has a pivotal role. Going back to your friend Paul McStay. Paul McStay talks about Roy Aitken winning the 1985 Scottish Cup final against Dundee United single-handedly. Still were rotten till the last 15 minutes, and it was Big Roy that grabbed him by the bootlaces, and I think it was Big Roy that put in the cross for McGarvey's wonder header. That's a captain, a guy that you can turn to. Jim said all this in the trenches. You turn it into a quest, which Rangers did this season. They turned this season into a quest, that siege mentality, and they threw the kitchen sink at it. Celtic underestimated that to their peril and never matched it, never matched that quest, never matched that feeling. Because how you can't feel that this is the most important season in a long, long time, since possibly 67 or since 74-5 when they were going for it the first time, is beyond me. But that's what Rangers did. They threw everything at it, and they might not have got the best players, but they functioned as a unit. They bought what the manager was selling, and by God, when they hit the front, they just charged on and thought about nothing else. Winning that title, that was it. It consumed their fibre in their being, right down to their captain Tavernier. People still slaughter him, whatever, but he's effective. He's a good player. You know what I mean? You can't deny that. But going back to captains, I mean, the Celtic captain has to be some kind of, not, and I say colossus, but not in height or stature, but a colossus, somebody who commands respect, reverence, knows what the club's about, and as Jim said, is the kind of man of the people who knows the fans and gets it, So we might have to recruit that person. Could be a concern, yeah, but they will know the job at hand. The go-to guy, as Jim said, the one that comes in and greets the new signing and say, right, this is how it breaks down. It does rain in Inverness. It does rain in Glasgow on a Wednesday night, that kind of thing, right? But that's neither here nor there, and it snows in the summer. But but yeah, and just break it down to them. You look at guys, and I get back to Moussa Dembele got it really quickly, right? And that's the kind of, I'm not saying you're going to get the calibre, but that's the kind of player that you want, the attitude that I mean. When you walk into that dressing room, you think, wow, I've joined something special, And so Moussa got it. So that's what you want to transmit to others. Lustig got it latterly, right? These guys just got it. So anyone coming into that dressing room, the focal point or the first point of call is the captain. So the captain has to get it first and foremost and then transmit that in the dressing room. And for some reason, it didn't happen this season, and it's tarnished. No, not tarnished, but the words Scott Brown has left the club a loser don't sit well with me, And for all that he did in the quadruple treble, and I've said that he's a club legend, and people can argue the toss about his abilities as a footballer. He's a good footballer. I'm not having anybody tell me that he's not a good footballer, because you do not last that amount of time at a club and not be a good footballer, right? Whether he was unambitious to go elsewhere, but he played against the best that European football had to offer. He achieved his ambitions at Celtic. He earned loads of money. See, when you're happy, that's hard to give up. He had 60,000 adoring people every other week, and he was happy.
I mean, I think that's a criticism of him that I don't agree with as well. It's like, on the one hand, we say about other players that they shouldn't be looking to go elsewhere because playing at Celtic should be an honour, it should be the height of your career. And then in the same breath, other people are criticising Scott Brown for not showing the ambition to go elsewhere. So, which way do you want it?
He achieved every ambition at Celtic. He competed against the very, very best. He might not have achieved that had he gone elsewhere, down to England, because as Jim probably said, maybe not have got a top 6 team or a team competing with at the top end of the table and getting into Europe on a regular basis. So there is nobody in European football of Scott Brown's era that he hasn't played against. And personal happiness is a big thing in football. And to you and I and Jim, Celtic is the be-all and end-all. It's not for other people who end up going elsewhere. But Scott Brown has shown you can be happy at Celtic. You can achieve. You can win and be successful and pit your wits against the best and be happy. That's the kind of players
also
that you
want.
want.
When you look back on it, the fact when he looks back on his career, he played over 600 games for Celtic. The vast majority of them as captain. He's won over 20 trophies. He's had over 50 caps for his country. A lot of them, he'd have been captain as well. So very, very, very few footballers can look at that. Playing in a top-class team, it's maybe different if you're playing for a team in the second or the third division, who are legends as well. I mean, if you play 300 games for Falkirk, I'd imagine people would say you're a legendary Falkirk player. You know, some teams you play 100 games, or you score a goal in a cup final, you become a legend. In fact, I've got a story I just kind of thought of there. Is that I wrote a play called Benedict Baxter about Scotland beating England 3-2 at Wembley, and there's a couple of iconic photographs at the end of the game. And there's a guy with Dennis Law and two guys with Jim Baxter. And I thought, as part of the research, I would go and try and find the fans. And I found the guy with Dennis Law, and he lives in your neck of the woods, Tony. So I went to see him to ask him what happened at Wembley, etc. So it turned out the guy played for Third Lanark in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
And in 1956, he played it in a Glasgow Cup. It wasn't the Glasgow Cup. It was less than that Glasgow Cup, right? So Third Lanark won this Glasgow Cup, not as good as the other Glasgow Cup. They beat Thistle in the final 4-2. They beat Rangers in the quarter-final on the toss of a coin, right? For the younger listeners, a toss of a coin is how you win a game before penalty kicks. They beat Celtic in the semi-final in the toss of a coin, and they beat Thistle 4-2 in the final. And this guy scored the second goal and get injured and stretchered off, right? So I come away thinking, I must find out more about this guy, right? So I Google it, and the first three things I see are Third Lanark Legends Nights, and this guy's mentioned in these three Legends Nights. So I'm thinking, I've been talking to a Third Lanark legend here. I then Google again, I'm trying to find out some information about Third Lanark, and I finally find one of these things where it's got all the appearances for the Third Lanark players. And the guy I was speaking to, the guy who was at the three Legends Nights, had played 2 games for Third Lanark. Right, 2 games, and he scored in the Glasgow Cup final, which is not as good as the other Glasgow Cup final. For that, he is a legend. 2 games, 1 goal. So if you classify that guy as a legend, over 600 games for Celtic, over 20 trophies, over 50 caps for your country, maybe he's a legend. Maybe. Who knows? You know?
Yeah.
Listen, I don't think anybody can deny, you know, there's plenty of debate about Scott Brown as a player, Scott Brown's temperament, this, that, the next thing. There's divide in the chat that I can see. One thing I'm sure we can all agree on, as Jim said, as Tony said, and as I agree, Charlie Nicholas is wrong on this occasion. Scott Brown is a Celtic legend. He's a legend of Scottish football. If you talk about the last decade, if you talk about the 2010s, one of the first names that will come to mind will be Scott Brown. So, you know, whatever Charlie Nicholas is using to measure it, I don't know, but he's certainly wrong in that case. Looking ahead, Tony, we talked about, you know, some of the other things that we were going to talk about in today's show, and one of the things we wanted to touch on is something that other guys on the pod have talked about in the week previous. Looking at where the next legend is going to come from, I suppose, and with the situation with COVID, with the situation with Brexit, there's an acceptance on all levels that I think we're going to have to look at the domestic market a lot more closely. Do you have any ideas of anybody that you think might be a good addition to the squad, or a way in which we can identify those players in the domestic game?
I was talking to Jim off camera before we came on live, and you know, a phrase that really bugs me is this: he's not Celtic class. Celtic supporters rail against elitism and that snobbery all their life, right? And then turn their nose if Celtic are linked with a player from Motherwell or Hibs or whatever. I kept hearing that about Declan Gallagher, right? Now, I've watched Declan Gallagher a lot. Declan Gallagher's an accomplished defender, right? And I would go as far as to say Declan Gallagher's a better defender than Christopher Ayer. There you go. Yeah. Now, I await the backlash in that one.
So just to clarify, you don't think Ayer's going to be our next captain?
Certainly not. He might be a captain, but it'll not be for Glasgow Celtic. Right, so, and people will say, what are you talking about? But I get that. But so I think that any young player or any player who's making waves at a Scottish football club, see, as a general rule of thumb, that should be a person of interest to Celtic.
Yeah.
Whether you sign them or not, you should be scouting them and going to watch them and then saying, by the way, worth a punt. You know what I mean? Because there'll be better value than some of the experiments that have been foisted upon managers in the past few years, and you won't have to pay a lot of money. Now, off the top of my head, Lewis Ferguson's a person of interest to me. Josh Doig at Hibs is a person of interest to me. Kevin Nisbet at Hibs is a person of interest to me. Martin Boyle at Hibs is a person of interest to me. Right? Now, they're no Celtic class punters are going to go off their nut. But if you're looking, if that's your market, these are players of interest, or they should be in Celtic, right? And you won't have to outlay a lot of money. And then you say, for every one of them, there's a David Fernandez, there's a Momo Silla and an Ulrich Larsson. I get that, right? But you give these guys that stage and you bring in better, more experienced players around them, give them a chance. Turnbull, you talk about the future of the club. Turnbull's up there then is the future of the club. Alan Campbell at Motherwell as well, another of interest or a player of interest. Celtic should be looking at these guys if they aren't doing so already. See if they're not doing it already, I'll do it for them. You know what I mean?
I tell you another one who's impressed me that I'd never really thought about is his name. I can't remember his first name, but James Forrest's brother at Livingston is a decent wee player. Yeah, Alan Forrest. I think he's pretty decent as well. But it's an interesting point that you make about the Hibs team, and Jim, I'll come to you on this. You know, we're talking about, our people are writing off these Hib players, Doig, Boyle, Nisbet, Ryan Porteous is another one who's of a decent standard. I don't really understand how people can be writing off players of this calibre when you look at the Hibs team of 10, 15 years ago that had Scott Brown, Stephen Whittaker, Kevin Thompson. Those players went on to prove themselves of an appropriate level to play for either Rangers or Celtic. So surely there's players in the current game that can do that as well, do you not think?
I think maybe the phrase Celtic class isn't getting used as much as it used to back in the day, I think. And if you classify, I think also fans would tend to look at people that they know. So it's people who are either playing in Scotland or England. Whereas the foreigners get a bit of a free pass on this, because if the definition of Celtic class is somebody who could walk into the first team, who's an experienced player, maybe an international player, maybe played in Europe, then 5 of the 6 guys that come in this season were Celtic class. They were all Celtic class then, because they've all played in Europe, they've all played at a high level, and the 6th player was the kind of next big thing in Scottish football. So I think we've signed players of Celtic class. I'm going to go all Celtic down on you here. That once upon a time, Celtic and other top clubs in Scotland would buy players from the lower leagues in Scotland, and I was thinking about that as you were speaking there. And 2 of our best ever signings, I would imagine, were Murdo McLeod and Davy Povin.
Yeah.
Back in '78, and they were playing for
Ryan McLeod also.
Martin. Well, I think the point I was going to make is I think both of those teams were in the league below when we signed them.
Right.
And they went on to be like fantastic players for Celtic. So there must be good players out there. And the thing that I've banged on before this season was the signing of John Joe Kenny. I think you could pick any player, not any player, you could pick 1 or 2 players in the Championship who'd be just as good, if not better, than John Joe Kenny. And people were talking about, well, it would cost 7 million and 15 grand a week. And you think, well, what planet are you on? So there must be players, and it's all about scouting. It's all about recruitment. It's all about knowing who these guys are and getting in there quick. Because I do believe, and I've said this before in the podcast, someone who's involved in kids football for the best part of 20 years, there's tons of kids out there that are very, very talented. We just need to get, identify them and get them in. Hopefully we'll get... Sorry?
Jason Kerr at St Johnstone's another person of interest, or he should be to Celtic. You know what I mean? I
think St Johnstone have got a number of players. So I think the players are there, and I think, just to echo what Tony said earlier, I don't think there's anything as Celtic class. I think that's maybe a kind of an old kind of fashion phrase that's kind of hopefully dying out, because it is a bit elitist. You don't want to say that. You want to buy... There's only 2 types of signings, good and bad. And you can only really tell that after a while. You can't tell when they walk in the door. Again, Shane Duffy was a fantastic signing. And then a few months later, no, he wasn't. So you really tell until you go a few months later. And we've signed guys in the past. I can think of people like Paul Hartley or Scott McDonald or
Barry Robson.
People like that who you thought, Barry Robson, aye, absolutely. And if you go back even further, even further to the Murdo days, with people like Johnny Doyle coming from Ayr, I think the players are there, and you only really know if they're good players. Plus, what the big disappointment this season was that even if we'd signed some of these kind of players last season, they wouldn't get a game. And one of the guys who's doing quite well just now, albeit at Queen's Park, is Luke O'Connell. I think we all said on this podcast, okay, it was only 45 minutes against Hibs before the season, but he's a decent player, but never get a chance. He was one of the 30. One of the 30 that never get a chance. So I've got no issues with playing in Scotland.
I would expect Luke O'Connell to be doing well at Queen's Park, but to be fair, so that's based. But I mean, it's just all about how your scouting system works and how you're going to use the Scottish market, because the players are there.
I'm going to put a wee word in for David Hanna here. He wasn't by any means the best player I've ever seen, but he was solid enough.
That's enough, Laura. That's enough wee words about David Hanna.
I would echo Tony's sentiments entirely.
That's too many wee words. David Hanna.
No disrespect to David Hanna. No disrespect to David Hanna, but he played his part, because this Sunday is Bratback Day, so he played his part.
I mean, I totally agree, but and to pick up on what Jim said, the major frustration for me with the whole thing is when you look at that famous photo that's been doing the rounds again this week of the signings that we made last summer. It was October by the time the transfer window closed, with everything that's going on. Are you telling me that Connor Hazard couldn't have been coached to be anywhere near as good a keeper as Barkas, given what we've seen, and it would have been cheaper than 5 million? Are you telling me we don't have at least one player, striker-wise, in the youth setup that could have been coached to be more effective than Klimala turned out to be for 3.5 million? So that's £8.5 million before you even touch anybody else. It's not just about going and picking the best of the crop from other clubs in the country. It's about looking at what we've got and seeing, surely there must be something else that works from within the system, because that's not doing us any favours either. But I'm in agreement. I think Lewis Ferguson is dividing opinion, but I would rather see him with us than not, potentially. I think there's a lot of good players out there that could do a job for us. Just finally before we go, and Tony, I'll come to you on this. We are sitting, as the card says, the title card says, there's an ongoing silence, 74 days to go until our Champions League qualifier games. Two things I wanted to touch on this. I saw people discussing earlier this week about whether Dominic Mackay should have come out and said anything by now to the fans. My personal opinion is the guy's in a bit of an awkward position. He's not officially in the job yet. And I think it would be a bit weird for him to come out and say, that guy's been doing it wrong, I'm going to do it this way. What do you think of people's, clamouring for him to come out and say something at the moment?
What if he's got nothing to say?
Well,
hello? I'm Dominic Mackay. Would that appease the fans? Say something, do something.
Yeah.
Hello. I mean, I'm Dominic Mackay.
Only for us to turn around and say, can you believe they said that?
And welcome to Celtic Anonymous. No, I don't know, what do you want?
Who's your captain?
Exactly. So it's like, unless I think Dominic Mackay's first thing that he has to do, or certainly be involved in, is the unveiling of the new manager, whoever that may be. Hopefully it's Eddie Howe. I want him to be part of that and get that Celtic good vibe, that positive vibe. I don't want him to come out and make a bland statement and people will just pick holes in the statement. I mean, he picked holes in what he was wearing the day he turned up at Celtic. He got a blue suit and a blue tie and a blue car and brown brogues. Just like, on the other side of the city, you're like, seriously, is this what it's come down to? You're just like, calm down, right? I know it's been a terrible season, but you're now lashing out at everything and anything for the sake of it. So I want Dominic Mackay to be standing there and to be as proud as punch to say, ladies and gentlemen, your Celtic manager is whoever that man may be, and feel that vibe and get the feel-good factor from that. Whenever that announcement is what's worrying Celtic supporters. But it's in the pipeline, it's coming, because it has to. I mean, you cannot not have a manager. So, so I watch. That's when I want to hear Dom.
Yeah, I would certainly echo Tony's comments. Sorry, is it me?
Yep.
Is it me? No, I can't hear.
Yeah.
Oh, I would certainly echo Tony's comments. If there's nothing to say, then don't say anything. But what he could actually say is, we're not going to Dubai next year, because that'll get people on his side straight away.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's as good a way as any to sign off. So thanks everybody for watching, for all the comments that have been coming through on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. We appreciate it as always. If you haven't done so, please subscribe below and turn on notifications. You'll get notifications whenever we go live every day for the Bulletin at 12:30 or for one of the myriad other shows that we have on the platform. An ever-growing list of shows that's coming to the platform. A plethora, Jim, that was the word I was looking for. But thanks again, everybody. We will see you as usual on Monday for the next Bulletin, and this has been A Celtic State of Mind.